So I'm going to be sharing in this module what is requirement engineering, how do you deliver requirements, how do you capture requirements, how do you analyze requirements, how do you actually make sure that your requirement is validated and approved, and then how do you manage it. It's called requirement traceability. What is a requirement? A requirement is a feature, a characteristics requested for by your stakeholders. Okay, so they have something called I want list. It's a wish list. So your job as a business analyst is to capture all this information, and then we'll show you how you can do that through requirement engineering. Now, why do we call it requirement engineering? It's like software engineering. It encapsulates the standards, the structure that we should actually deliver requirements. So it's got really 5 core elements. 5 core elements. First one is the requirement capture. So you're capturing it, you're gathering it, you're eliciting it. You can use any of those 3 words. Then you analyze your requirement. Then you validate. There's a very basic line that cuts across those 3 activities. As you're eliciting, you're documenting. As you're analyzing, you're documenting. As you're validating, you're documenting. And then you have another layer, which is your requirement management, which is where you're doing any change to a baseline requirement. So what is baseline? Something that's been signed off. A snapshot, a point in time is a baseline. That is like a final version of a document. So there's something I want to introduce to you called version control. So when you create a requirement document or any document at all, it should be in draft format, right? So your draft format is not point something. It will be a decimal. And then when it's formally signed off, it becomes a whole number. So these are the kind of topics and activities that we take in a classroom environment. So now moving back to requirement engineering. So I've just told you what are the 5 core elements of requirement engineering, why it is requirement engineering, what a requirement is, why should we even bother about requirement? So now let's now go back into how we go about eliciting. So the step number 1 is eliciting or gathering. How do we go about that? Remember I told you that business analysis is a toolkit approach. So in this scenario, we go back to our investigation techniques. You're eliciting. So in the same instance, you're going to be running workshops. You're going to be having one-to-one interviews. You're going to be using scenario. You're going to be prototyping. You're going to be using all those analysis tools to gather information from your stakeholders. Can you see that business analysis is actually simple? You're still using the same approach. You're just looking for the right kit in the bucket to apply to this particular scenario. So after you've had meetings with your stakeholders, or you've applied any of these investigation techniques, they will give you their I want list, okay? They can't get everything. Like I said, we all want so many things. Part of your analysis, which is the step number 2, is where you now prioritize their requirement. So you do something called applying requirement filters. So what are the filters? You want to make the requirement smart. So you're using things like looking out for, duplication, contradicting information, ambiguous requirements. Ambiguous requirements is where you say and, or you're joining up requirements together. Or things that maybe it's been captured in another team. You want to make sure that you're aligning all of this. And when you're analyzing your requirements, you want to tell a story. It's like if you're building a house, you will not put the roof on before you do the foundation. So it has to be logical. You have to tell a story. You put the foundation, you put the flooring, you put the walls in before you get to the next level. So that is how you have to think about your requirement when you're analyzing it. Tell a story, make it robust, remove any conflicts, and apply an acronym called INVEST, okay? So it has to be independent, it has to be negotiable, it has to be, valuable, it has to be estimable, and it has to be testable. So you need to make sure that when you're looking at your requirements, you're analyzing, you're making it more clear and easy for anyone that's going to consume it. So now you've done your eliciting, you've done your analysis. Remember, you can capture your requirements in a Word document, in Excel, or a tool. Some organizations use Jira, some use ClickUp, some use TFS or any tool. Like I said, tool is just a tool that you use to do your work. But what goes in that tool is what you and I need to know. So this requirement is written in a way that there's this format: the system shall or the user shall. That is how we write requirement. So during your analysis is when you do your MOSCAL, which is your priority. That is one of the techniques that you can use to prioritize requirements. M means must have, should have, could have, and won't have this time. Some other organizations might have a different way of prioritizing the requirements. Maybe they use large, medium, low. It's up to them. But according to BCS, this is the prescribed way to do it. So you will be doing the prioritization with your stakeholders, okay? And making sure you carry them along, because they will tell you what matters most to them. So once you've done your analysis, you've prioritized your requirements, you've applied your filter, you've removed all ambiguity, then you're ready to present it for a sign-off. Every work we deliver as a business analyst must get an approval. So you take it to your key stakeholders and get their approval. Oftentimes you might have iteration, they might give you feedback. So when you're sending it out, send it in advance, give them a lead time of 5 days thereabout to review it and come back with comments, or you bring them into a workshop where you can get the feedback there and then. So a couple of iterations might happen before you finally get a signed off or baselined document, which means fantastic, well done. You've just got your first BRD done. So BRD is business requirement document. Now I'm going to talk about the last phase, which is the requirement management. So we've signed off the requirement, it's baseline. However, there is a change. Your stakeholder says, I need this, but you're not having it in this bucket. I need you to put it in that bucket because I want it now. So what you need to do is put this under something called change control. Organizations work differently, but there will be a body that governs the changes that goes into that pool of work. So here is where you now do something called change control. So you do impact assessment to review that change request. And then if it's agreed by all impacted people, there's cost to it, there's funding to it, there's time estimation done, then it can go into the workflow and it can get delivered. You as a BA need to update your requirement document to the next version. Send it out to everyone to review once again, because things have changed, and then you put it under version control, and it also needs to be signed off again. So once you've done that with your requirement, you are good to go. What you need to do is just to manage it and work with the team until the requirements are delivered. They might have questions for you, or they might need some clarification. Just be there to support them. And towards the end of the project, we do something called requirement traceability matrix. So you can trace vertically, you can trace horizontally. This is just to make sure that what we agreed in the beginning, when we capture the requirement, is what was delivered. And it ends with end of project closure. So that is how, in a nutshell, you apply requirement engineering, i.e. using those 5 steps to be able to ensure that you have delivered a robust solution to your organization.